Hi, thanks so much for tuning in. You're watching Infravisioning, and my name is Alex Matthew. This show deals with everything infrastructure. And today we're going to talk about quite an interesting concept when it comes to energy storage. And you probably are aware of this if you think about it. Almost all of the storage-related electricity in the world is hydropower based. But the concept we're talking about today might just provide a solution for the biggest problem with renewable energy, which is the fact that you cannot store it. To talk about this more and to flesh this out, I'm joined by Vinayak Chatterjee, the founder and managing trustee of the Infravision Foundation. Thanks so much, Vinayak, for taking the time. When you sent me this note, I had a big question mark on my face because I saw concrete blocks that could potentially be used to generate electricity. How could that possibly work?
So, Alex, let me step back a minute for the benefit of all your viewers to just set the context of energy storage. Basically, we are talking about renewable energy storage. And as all your viewers know, that at peak production time, midday, let us say, when the sun is shining, the wind is blowing, not all the energy can be used. There's a surplus of renewable generation. So the energy needs to be stored, otherwise it's just wasted, which is really disappointing because a large amount of capex has gone in to harness those energies and convert it into electricity. So definitely we need a way to store renewable energy. Now, the context also says that as per the Indian visioning documents that we have announced at COP26 and other fora, India is targeting about 500 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030. Now, the Central Electricity Authority, CEA, also reckons that we need a matching storage capacity, renewable storage capacity of 60 gigawatts, which is, so 60 upon 500 is roughly 12%. So we require 12% of matching renewable capacity, and we require 60 gigawatts by 2030. The visibility currently is a little less than 30 megawatts, so there's a long way to go before we are able to actually have the required amount of storage capacity. But coming back to the question you raised, what are the methods of storing? And I'll come back to a concrete block story later. What are the methods of storing? Obviously, the most well-known method is batteries. You have an inverter at home, you store electricity in a battery, and when the lights go off, the inverter comes on because of battery storage. So battery storage is known to everybody. Then is the interesting phenomena of pump hydro storage, yes, where the renewable energy is used to pump water up, and when the water comes down, it runs a turbine and electricity is produced as and when required. So PHS, pump hydro storage, is method number 2. Method number 3 is green hydrogen. After all, you use renewable energy to separate the oxygen and the hydrogen, and you can the hydrogen separately, called green hydrogen. And in some senses, that stored hydrogen is nothing but stored renewable energy. The fourth is your CBD, which is concrete block drop. Now, this is a new one. And it is, as of now, a technology that is being intensively explored for commercial exploitation. From speaking to a few people who have had the benefit of a presentation by the companies that install such sites, there is still some way to go because it requires massive civil structures. But very simple, if you can pull water up by using renewable energy and a pump, surely you can move a concrete block by a crane or a crane system up to a height. And when that concrete block is released, or a stream of concrete blocks is released, then their motion converts into, running a dynamo that,
I was looking at some articles that spoke about a concept from 2018, which was based on certain technology, and ultimately the hardware that we're using is common in terms of a crane structure that will hold multiple blocks of concrete, and that is lifted when there is surplus power, renewable power, and that is dropped when that power is required. It runs a motor and generates electricity. And what it spoke about Vinayak, was the fact that the conversion of that electricity is 85% and therefore comparable with lithium-ion batteries, which give you 90% conversion. That is, you store 100% of electricity and you get 90% back or 85% back. The question is there proof of concept? And is this something that can be employed? Because one would think that setting up a structure like this is possible, considering that there are companies that make large cranes, and getting that much concrete and cheap concrete at that is also possible.
The short answer to your question is yes. There are a few companies who are aggressively advocating use of this technology. So the technical answer is, of course, yes, it is. The real issue is that people who will then invest in it, the developers of power plants, etc., are still working out the total costing, because in pump hydro, you require to buy land. Basically, you create a pond and the water is stored in that reservoir. In the case of concrete block, you require very strong, very large civil structures. So the comparative costing between the two is still an open question. But yes, this technology, I think, with some fine tuning, will soon be available. Alex, am I allowed a lighter moment on your show?
Of course.
I'm pretty serious. So a friend and I were discussing this, and they said that one of the demographic dividends for India, since we have such a large population, is that if you can have a slide like a water slide, right? And instead of concrete blocks, you have a stream of human beings sliding down, right? You could theoretically use it to store energy, because instead of lifting a concrete block, like a ski ropeway, I will lift you up in an escalator, and you slide down, and a stream of human beings sliding down is probably easier to handle than a block of concrete. Now, I leave that thought to you, just in case you and your colleagues at BQ Prime wish to explore this subject a little more. It's part of what I call the demographic dividend.
You know, in Mumbai, you never run out of electricity, but perhaps it's something to consider, and maybe we can get in touch with the BMC where they can generate something like this for people that are commuting to work, and you can generate electricity on the go. So that is certainly something to consider. But another question that I had is that, as I understand it, Vinayak, the way that the grid has now been tweaked and is being used is that renewable energy has the first right. Whenever it is produced, it is used in the grid. So to a certain extent, that requirement for storage is mitigated, is it not?
It is, which is why the ratio is 60 to 500. See, as per the CEA projections, a generation capacity by 2030 of 500 gigawatts requires a storage backup capacity of 60 gigawatts. So 60 upon 500, that's 12%. So they have done the maths, and that the maths answers your question, that 12% is felt to be the appropriate amount of the time when actually there is surplus production, because everybody is producing at that time, and coal thermal power plants are not usually backed down, because it is difficult to shut down a boiler and then restart it again. You can do it much easier with gas. So please remember that coal thermal plants are operating, but then they back down to a lower PLF and renewable takes over. Having said it, you can't back down to a PLF less than 40, 45, because then it becomes dysfunctional. So even when a thermal power plant is working at 40 or 45%, there could be an excess supply of renewable energy which needs storage, right?
Yeah.
So what we haven't discussed is there is technically another form of storage, which I will call negative storage, which is time of day pricing. Now, if I can shift a lot of load that's running in the load in factories, in homes, running washing machines and, it's ACs, etc. If with time of day pricing, which we discussed earlier on your channel, if a certain amount of load is moved to the sunshine hours, then obviously the pressure on having storage goes down somewhat. So in some senses, time of day is also a kind of a storage. It's a kind of a storage solution. in a different sense.
So the bottom line, and I think a lot of novel concepts are in the works. Maybe someday in the future we'll be able to see concrete blocks being used to generate electricity. But the bottom line, of course, is that we need to create that storage. It is the need of the hour. Vinayak, thank you so much for joining in and for getting us to think a little bit more about these novel concepts.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Alex.
All right, viewers, there you have it. Think about this after this conversation is over, the use of concrete blocks and gravity in order to generate electricity. Do stay tuned. Lots more coming up on BQ Prime.